Hey, you are now listening to the Graceway Podcast. Let's talk.
With special guests, Todd Gentleman and Jeff Adams.
Hey everybody, how you all doing? Jeff Adams here, and it's time for us to talk. And today I'm talking not with Pastor Tim, I'm talking with Pastor Todd.
Yeah.
So you got to have a pastor with a T that follows
go.
that. And Pastor Tim, these last couple of weeks, has been out ministering to some of our ministry partners.
Yeah.
And so I got to speak last week.
Yeah.
And this time you got to speak, Pastor Todd. I get to interview you.
Let's do it.
Good word, brother.
Thank you.
And today you were talking about how to fix a marriage, right?
Yes.
And what impressed me, you came right out of the box and you went for the juggler, and I thought this was great because you made an astounding point that marriages are in trouble today.
Yeah.
Some people even question the concept of marriage.
Yeah.
And the point that you made is that marriage does not exist for one's personal satisfaction.
Yeah.
And that one of the reasons that we have so many trouble is because people come into the marriage thinking, what's in it for me?
Yeah.
My question for you, because I just thought that was so profound, so good, so real, but it seems like our entire society in this country right now is in that mode.
Sure.
My rights,
Yeah.
my choice, my freedom, my this, and I get all of that.
Yeah.
But it seems like we have taken that to a new level where everything centers around me.
Sure.
What's your take on that as it relates to marriage, and do you see that connection?
Yeah, so I think that really the call of the gospel is antithetical to our civilization. so
That's another profound statement.
yeah, so it's like it only makes sense that in marriage it would also be antithetical to follow the way
Yeah.
of Jesus, to lay your own rights down,
Right.
and to deny yourself and to consider someone else's needs over your own.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the foundation of a gospel person.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the foundation for a gospel marriage, but it gets a little convoluted because you want to have joy,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the way that we pursue the joy that gets us in trouble. Because we pursue joy at the expense of the other,
Yes.
not in service to the other.
Oh, that's good.
And so it's like, well, you're not actually going to get a happy marriage that way anyway.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of people, even people who aren't Christians, who find themselves having joy in marriage, actually follow Christian principles in marriage without
Right.
knowing it.
Right.
Considering, there are Christian principles in that, and we want the other person to satisfy our every need and desire, but they never can do that.
Yeah.
And so it's a self-defeating,
Yeah.
goal.
Never going to find the satisfaction that you desire
Yeah.
when it's all focused on me.
Yeah, and even if you do momentarily, like there's maybe a season,
Sure.
then what do you do in seasons where it's going to cost you something? There may be seasons where like you're getting a lot out of the relationship and it is joyful, but then there's going to be seasons where maybe sickness happens
Yeah, absolutely.
or some kind of loss or something detrimental happens. There's no framework for suffering in the confines of marriage, so you just bail and go try to find somebody else who can momentarily satisfy
Yeah.
your pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah, momentarily.
Yeah,
being
momentarily.
the key word.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something else, because you went into another section as you were teaching us this morning, and you set it up with a quote from G.K. Chesterton.
Yeah.
And I just thought that quote was like a bombshell. I want you to unpack that, if you could
Yeah.
repeat that, and kind of, I think people out there that perhaps have heard what you said, and if you haven't, you need to listen to Pastor Todd's message today, because it really was good. But unpack the Chesterton quote.
Yeah, so he says he's seen lots of happy marriages, but no compatible marriages. And he says marriage is at the very point where incompatibility is unquestionable. Like when no one would question how incompatible we are for each other, that we fight to stay together. And that is what marriage is, because by definition, we're not compatible. So while we're pursuing compatibility in marriage,
Mm-hmm.
but we are completely incompatible. So we should pursue something else.
Mm-hmm.
Personal growth and sacrifice, and that kind of led me down this path of like, well, we're never, we marry somebody because of some compatible realities, but that person's going to change in a year
Yeah.
and be a different type of person. So I need to adjust and shift too to keep this marriage going, because if they're going to change, I need to be changing. We need to be changing together and growing together. And it kind of puts you on this lifelong pursuit of learning my spouse.
Right.
Yeah.
And that old proverb that says iron sharpens iron, that we usually apply to a couple of grizzled old men. But I think it applies to marriage as well. And what thrilled me to hear you give that quote this morning and the way that you worked it. You do a lot of things here at Graceway. You are a teaching pastor. You also are a teacher of church planting and a coach in church planting, but you're also our young adult pastor.
Yeah.
And every time it seems like you see young people begin to date each other, it's all about, are we compatible?
Yep.
And how would you coach a young couple who's going through that struggle?
I mean, there are obviously things you want to connect on.
Right.
And see, like, oh man, I would enjoy, right, doing more things with this person and growing. And but if compatibility is the chief end, then we set ourselves up for failure, because you're only going to be compatible until you actually start living together.
Yeah.
And being married and being like, oh, you do that way? And you start realizing who I thought I knew is different now that you're my wife.
Yeah.
And if compatibility was my pursuit, now I'm angry, right?
Yeah.
Because I was sold a bill of goods.
Right.
You're not who I thought you were.
Yeah.
And so now, well, we shouldn't be married anymore. As opposed to, man, I'm interested in learning who this person is.
I think that really happens, don't you? I mean, I
Oh,
think that's
of
why
course.
marriages break down.
I would joke with my wife, there were certain aspects of, each parent that you like really admire. And you're like, man, I'm excited to see that aspect of because they're going to be like their parents in some
Right,
way.
right.
So like, man, I can't wait to see how that looks like in marriage. But then we obviously bring out negative aspects of the people that raised us. And I was like, I didn't get married to you for that aspect. I didn't want that in our marriage, but it is. And it's like, okay, I love that part of you too. And I have to learn and grow and adapt with who you are.
Well, you
Yeah.
told a very cool story about how you first met the lovely Miss Juliet.
Yeah.
And how you went out on your first date and you began to see the things that you had in common.
Yeah.
And some people would say, yeah, we're looking to see if we're compatible. And probably neither one of you had grown at that point to have had that discussion.
Right.
You were building on the things you had in common.
Yes.
And then you get married and you discover, oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
But instead of giving up, you discover who that person really is.
Yeah, and that's the, I wouldn't say it's the hard work of marriage. It's kind of like the beautiful part of marriage, if you want to reframe it and just be
Yeah.
like, I get to discover who God is making this person into,
Exactly.
and I get to play a part in that.
And not just who the person is, but I like the way that you just said that, who God is making this person into.
Yeah.
I say that personally, that, I want to be a lifelong learner. I never want to stop learning, never want to stop changing.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing you say is marriage is exactly like that. Of course, the person that we're married to now is not the same person that we married.
Right.
If they are, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
Because we learn from each other and we complement each other.
Right.
Compatibility in that sense is more of complementing each other.
Yes.
And playing upon our differences.
Yeah, I need your strengths, and in your weaknesses, you need my strengths, and that we benefit. I don't get angry at your weaknesses. That's my opportunity in our relationship to benefit you.
You said something else, and I really like the way that you expressed it. You were talking about marriage as a good thing. God
Right.
says marriage is a good thing.
Yes.
But then you made a couple of points from that.
Yeah.
Marriage can't be a good thing if it's the worst thing.
Yes.
But then you said something, and everybody kind of chuckles
Yeah.
because that's obvious.
Yeah.
But then you said, you're also in trouble if you think that marriage is the best thing.
Yep.
And you're hitting these idealistic people that
Yes.
think that, we have to dress exactly like and think exactly like, and it's
Yep.
just all daisies and unicorns and rainbows.
Yes. Because the only way, if you assume this is the best, then there's no growth for that. It's only down.
Yeah.
You can only be disappointed
Yeah.
in the best.
Right.
Because, if somebody's at the top of their game, then you just get out. That's the best time to leave, because you leave people, that's the best time. So like if God says it's a good thing, it's like, let's not destroy it and detract from it, and also let's not over elevate it to a
Yeah.
place that God didn't give it.
Right.
It's like, that's a good thing. So you leverage it, use it, grow from it. But your relationship with God is the best part about you. So like, because he can't disappoint you.
Right.
He won't let you down. So make him the best and let them be good. And then
Yeah.
you can grow with good.
There's always room to grow.
Yes, you can grow with good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, you used another metaphor that I found fascinating, and the metaphor was that of a battlefield, that marriage is a battlefield.
Yes.
And I think some people, when they first heard that, may have thought, what? But you presented that as though that's a positive. And it's kind of connected to what we're just talking about, but kind of unpack that for us a little bit.
Yeah, so, I mean, marriage, everyone fights in marriage. Like, there's always, but marriage, like, to be married and to have joy in it, it's a battle. It's like a fight to find joy for yourself and the other person with your brokenness. Like, we're gonna find joy in the midst of this. And sometimes, like, there's gonna be contentious stuff, but we're gonna fight in such a way that brings unity, not division. And we're gonna fight for each other, not against each other in this. And you got to make some agreements to do that. So you got to,
Right.
Make some decisions before you get there. You're always going to make mistakes. You're always going to say something out of anger. You're always going to, throw a jab when you should, talk things out. All that kind of stuff. But the goal, the realization is like, hey, this is not going to be, strolling through the park. They're going to be, because you have landmines in your life that I don't even know exist.
Right.
And someday I'm going to step on one and get hurt. And so we got to figure out how in the midst of that to heal and to, move forward together. So
Yeah.
yeah, marriage is definitely a battlefield.
One of the things that I've always struggled with teaching about marriage as a pastor is the fact that today we're looking out to a congregation, and statistically we know that half of the adults in this country are not married.
Right.
And it always was a challenge to me, how do I teach on marriage and yet give something to people who are not married for one reason or another? It may be tragedy, it may be a
Sure.
death, it may be a choice, or
Right.
whatever. And I appreciate at the end of your message today, you threw some attention to people
Right.
there that were not married. What else would you say, Pastor Todd, to people who are not yet married, people who have no plan to get married?
Sure.
How can they benefit from the teaching that you were giving today? All these things that we've just talked about.
Sure. I think that if somebody desires to get married, I think that's one thing, because I think everything today really applies to the desires. Like, you define your desire the way God does. It'll be good. It won't be the best, but it probably won't be the worst thing either. But like, have your sights set on the right place. Understand that you're going to bring baggage and brokenness into a relationship. You aren't a perfect spouse, and you shouldn't look for one. But you should look for a spouse you can be perfected with
Right.
as you walk together. So I think those who desire marriage, I think those who don't desire marriage, I would just kind of ask, what the reasons why. Because marriage is a good thing, doesn't mean everybody's going to be married. But when we're vehemently against getting married, typically that comes from somewhere. Either trauma, some kind of experience in the past. And so doesn't mean you have to get married ever, it just means you need to probably evaluate in the same way you would evaluate yourself when you're married to somebody, because your deficiencies are being reflected back to you. So if you're like, I'm not going to get married, it's like, well, that doesn't excuse you from investigating why you make decisions. And
Many years ago, somebody told me something that was just marked me.
yeah,
They said, that passage in Genesis about it's not good for a man to be alone.
yeah,
They said, that's not a marriage verse, that's a human being verse.
yes,
Because like you just explained, there are people who are not married for very legitimate reasons,
Sure.
and some who never will be.
yeah,
But yet it is not good for a human being to be alone.
sure.
And I would imagine, don't you, that the principles that you've been talking about, learning from each other, understanding the compatibility is a pipe dream.
Yes.
You could apply these same principles to any human relationship, or even in the workplace.
Definitely, because if you're only out for your own pleasure, where are you going to be a functioning member of society at?
Yeah.
Like, no one else cares about your own pleasure. If they're caring about their own, And so it becomes a dog eat dog situation.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
So it's not good for you to be alone. You're right. That's not a marriage statement necessarily, first and foremost. And so, well, how can I not be alone?
Yeah.
And it's with a lot of the principles that make a good marriage.
Yeah.
Self-sacrifice, self-denial, considering the other before yourself. Those are all just great relationship models.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Marriage and you said this also, that marriage is a metaphor of a relationship with God.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the marriages around us should be a metaphor of how human beings need each other, how we learn from each other, how we work together. You know, we both, because of what we do and who we are, we tend to have revealing discussions after services, praying with people, talking to people. And I was talking to a young single who has just begun a new job. And it's been a challenge coming into a situation where there's various different cultures and misunderstandings and whatnot. And as I was trying to give her some advice this morning, I'm thinking about some of the principles that you've been talking about marriage to a single person in a work situation.
That's good.
And just feels like everything that you said was absolutely on target for relationships and not just marriage.
Sure. Yeah.
Something else I want to ask you about, and we'll run out of time here sooner or later, but you gave some of the most practical advice that I've heard in a sermon on marriage at the very end. You said there's 3 practical steps that people can take in marriage. Would you refresh our minds, because maybe somebody had to get up and refill their water glass when you were talking about this.
So I mentioned, like, when we're on the battlefield of marriage, that we need to turn towards one another, not away from each other. And then as we turn towards one another, turn to God. So I wanted some practical ways to do that, because that's a great statement, but then how?
Yeah, exactly.
So I just started thinking through things that other mentors have told me that we've done in my own marriage that are great. And the first thing was, because we have so many unspoken expectations in marriage, that my wife and I have done an expectations worksheet, where you list out numbers 1 through 10. You write out 10 very specific expectations you have of the other person. Things that maybe you get angry at these things, like they never take the trash out, they never help me cook, they never wash the dishes, they never get up with the baby in the middle of the night. Different things that you have never told them you wanted them to do, but you get angry with them when they don't do it.
Yeah.
When you make those, you write those out, then you hand your paper to your spouse, and then you let them grade that. They look at your expectations of them, and they can say, no problem, no way, or let's talk.
I love that.
And we just end up laughing a lot, because I'll say, I expect this from you, and she'll say, no way. And I'm like, well, that's not very hard. Why is that a no way? And now we're talking about it. And almost always we're coming to some kind of consensus about something we're both satisfied in.
Yeah.
And it keeps us from stepping on landmines of, like, me doing something wrong that I didn't know I was doing wrong. So I think once a quarter, that should happen. Like, that's our quarterly check-in with the spouse.
That is such great advice, man.
Yeah, you do it at work.
Yeah, exactly.
Quarterly evaluation. Just do
Right.
do it on a date night.
Yeah.
The second one was, have a date every week.
Right.
Once a week, go on a date. And I think that for busy people, there can always be an excuse of, like, once a week, I don't have the time. I'm like, well, I don't think you have the time to not do that once a week.
Put it on the calendar.
Yes. and make it the same time every week. Like,
Right.
It can be in the morning,
Right.
before work. Like, if y'all disagree, like, we're going to make time, or it can be
Go out to breakfast.
Go out to breakfast.
Yeah.
Go out to, or just find the time. If you don't have the money, you don't even need money. So I just gave some practical examples of cheap dates, free dates. Take a board game to a coffee shop and get hot water and bring your own tea bag. I don't know if that's loitering or not, but we've done that multiple times. We had no money,
Yeah.
but we needed to prioritize our marriage regardless of what we had or didn't have.
Exactly.
And then third thing was just pray together every day.
Yeah.
So once a day, once a week, once a quarter, there's something you can practically do to turn towards one another and towards God.
What does that look like, praying every day? And the reason I ask that question is because some people have the idea of, like, the old family devotion. We're going to set aside this time. We're going to, do a prayer list. And not that there's anything wrong with that.
No.
But give me some examples of what that might look like.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not the best planner, so, like, having it on my calendar to pray or a reminder on my phone, I probably should do that. I don't. But I always, at some point in the day, the Holy Spirit will nudge me, pray with your wife.
Yeah.
There will be a moment, opportunity, And I can either join him in that or ignore him in that. And sometimes I just made it a personal practice. I can't end the day without praying for my wife. So sometimes in bed, we're both falling asleep, I'll just reach over, hey, I want to pray for you real quick. And I'll pray, and she'll usually respond back unless she's, asleep by the end of it or whatever. But it's just, it does something to us connectedness-wise.
Sure.
To just pray together. And it lets me know, like, there are things in her life that I can't do for her that only God can do. So I'm going to ask the one who can actually help her.
Yeah.
Because I think, especially as a husband, I think sometimes I get angry when my wife has situations I can't fix.
Yeah.
So prayer is a great answer for that.
Yeah.
So instead of being angry at her that I can't fix her situation, I could just say, like, well, I can't fix that. Can I just pray?
Yeah.
And so we get to do that.
That is great advice, and my wife and I have more or less the same rhythm where we want to pray with each other before we go to bed, and sometimes things come up.
Sure.
But I mention that because in counseling with people, and I'm not a counselor, I'm not a therapist, I don't play one on television. I just want to make that clear.
Yeah.
But you and I both find ourselves giving advice about marriage and whatnot, and I think sometimes what happens, and this happened to us when we first got married, I was more of a jerk and an idiot than I am today, believe it or not. I mean, I was absolutely unprepared.
Yeah.
We didn't have the resources back then that we have today. And so my vision in my little pious world, since we got married, then my wife and I would kneel beside the bed each night. Mm-hmm. We would read a chapter of some book on marriage, and then we would pray together, and it was so formal. Well, what I found in life, those things are usually not sustainable. They sound really good.
Yes.
But then what happens, you stop doing that, and then you feel guilty, and you get into this downward spiral.
Yeah.
And so I think that by giving people practical suggestions like that, where, hey, this doesn't have to be something formal, it doesn't have to be a big deal, but
Right.
we're praying together, we're inviting God into marriage.
Yep.
And
And
that's
it
what I'm
can
hearing
be
you say.
super quick and practical.
Yeah.
God,
yeah.
hey, we just thank you for our marriage. It's
Yeah.
been tough. We need your help.
Yeah.
Would you just help us today?
And sometimes you might be dealing with a problem and you're praying for 15 minutes.
Yeah, maybe.
Earnestly.
Yeah.
And then some nights it might be, hey, thanks God for all that you do, and God bless us, and see you tomorrow.
And if you don't hit the daily, then there's a weekly. If you don't hit the weekly, that once a quarter.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to give people different options
Yeah.
for different schedules and say, hey, you can hit these.
Well, I appreciate that, and I know that everybody else does too, and we're running out of time here, but I just want to again remind people who are listening to us, if you didn't listen to the message, and you can access it on the Graceway website or YouTube or Facebook, or there's a lot of different options, and so please go back and look at what Pastor Todd had to say about marriage, and if you're not married or not planning on getting married, please understand what we were talking about earlier. There is a lot of good material in here for you, no matter who you are.
Yeah.
And as human beings, we need each other, and we need you, and we'll look to see you again at the same time next week.
Thanks for tuning into the Graceway Experience. Hope we can talk again sometime.